3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Welcome to Moontower HQ. My name is Nick.
Yuri, thanks for joining us again.
All right, so jumping right into it, we are going to be talking about CBDC, centrally banked digital currencies, and as well as the topic of financial sovereignty. Recently, there have been a lot of banks that have explored the concept of a digital currency for both their central banking needs as well as other issuances. Primarily, the two banks that have been spearheading this have been the Canadian banks, actually, as well as the British banks. So the Bank of England has recently created a service that supported a possible digital currency CBDC, and it is going to be a network that's used by the UK financial institutions, not just the central bank itself. And this is a very interesting trend and development because with it, there are quite a lot of implications, both to the individual as well as the concept of sovereign money. Before we dive into that, however, I think, Yuri, would you be able to tell the audience the biggest difference that you see that stands out between public blockchains and private blockchains?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that a blockchain cannot really be a private blockchain because blockchain by default is something that is run across multiple computers in the world in a non-restricted way. So, and the only viable blockchain, in my opinion, right now is Bitcoin. The Bitcoin blockchain is essentially a database. It's a ledger that runs on tens of thousands of computers worldwide. Anybody can run this database. You and I actually run one instance of such database. And the reason for that instance is to verify the rules and the integrity of the ledger of the list of all the transactions that have ever happened on the Bitcoin blockchain. So this is why such distribution is necessary, because this is how Bitcoin is resilient, by way of thousands and thousands of computers verifying its integrity, the integrity of the database. So when you talk about a private blockchain, you essentially talk about only a few computers necessarily managed by the bank itself running this blockchain as miners. They actually have no miners. They essentially just validation computers that validate the blockchain. And then it just raises the question, why do you need a blockchain at all if it's already centralized? Well, I think the answer to this question is that they don't really need it, because pretty much every single transaction type, every single function that they perform on such a private blockchain can be performed via a simple SQL database, just a simple database that is used in production on many very different websites these days, on all kinds of applications. It can be used for creating a digital currency as well, because if you imagine what a digital currency is, it's just a ledger. It's just a set of accounts between which amounts of money move. That's all it needs. So if you are a central bank and you want to issue a centralized digital currency, then you don't really need a blockchain. All you need is a secure database, and modern databases can also be distributed and shared among multiple participants and secured in many different ways. So there's absolutely no need for a blockchain. So that is the biggest difference between public and private blockchains.
Thanks, Yuri. And one of the most famous examples I think that people have been hearing about in general in terms of a digital currency that is run by a big organization, whether it be a government or a corporation, in this case is Libra. So Facebook has come out with that quite a while back, and they originally had a lot of people on board, including payments providers such as Visa, MasterCard, as well as other banks. However, when they got up to the meeting with the regulators and started talking about what the long-term goal of it was, which essentially was to create a worldwide network of payments that would be integrated in their messaging infrastructure as well into their social networks, the government had some issues with this. And there are a couple of reasons why this is. And primarily one of the most dangerous aspects of a private blockchain that is not controllable is the fact that, or is not controllable by the parties other than the people who hold it, is the fact that, exactly like you said, realistically, all you need is just a simple database to provide that type of usability. However, when the word blockchain comes into effect, or when the word digital currency comes into effect, what you end up doing is you taking out the security aspect, which in Bitcoin is proof of work, and replacing it with some other type of control mechanism. This control mechanism in Libra in particular was completely up to the jurisdiction of the corporate, if you will, entities rather than the government itself. This control over not only just how much money is in circulation, but what the limits and restrictions of the transacting parties are, is exactly the reason that governments are afraid and did not pass Libra as a means of creating this network of a worldwide payment system. And primarily that is because they feel that it is their job. It is their job to control the supply. It is their job to be able to restrict payments from one region to another and to hand over that control to corporations, and to corporations that already have such a high degree of power brings with it a lot of issues. I will read a quick excerpt from bankofcanada.ca that shows how they feel about Libra and the associated systems. So, the threat to the Canadian financial system beyond Libra. It says, Libra still needs to resolve many regulatory issues, including those related to cross-border payments and know your customer anti-money laundering requirements. However, there are other digital currencies denominated in other units accounts that can disrupt a central bank's ability to stabilize prices and act as the lender of last resort. So from this, what they are essentially saying is that other digital currencies, such as Bitcoin, for example, which is primarily what they're referring to, but Libra included to some degree, takes away the autonomy of the central banking system. It takes away their ability to, well, cause inflation and manipulate the total circulating supply of money in order to be able to prop up the economy, as is currently what is going on. With this polarization of governments and wanting to control the economic systems, it's clear that when they're creating their digital token or their digital currency, and literally verbatim in their words, as a means of person-to-person payments and a replacement for cash, is something that threatens financial sovereignty in general. Yuri, in your opinion, what do you feel could be the implications of a government-backed digital currency that is now mandated to be used within a particular country and a nation in order to get subsidies, for example, or to get bailouts or loans? What are the implications of that on a broader scale, you think?
Well, I think what we're talking about is legal tender laws, which simply mean that whatever currency the government or the central bank of that government issues is legal tender in the country, which means that everybody has the legal obligation to accept that currency. You cannot say no to that currency. That means that, yes, the economic activity will be happening because it is forced, under law. But at the same time, I don't think it will be as any more efficient than the current fiat system, because what you just described is just a reinvention of fiat money in a new medium, whether it's on a private blockchain, private central database, which I would argue right now, the majority of money circulating in the world is actually electronic already. It is already in private databases, central bank databases. So with only, probably some lower single digit percentages being represented in actual physical cash that is in circulation. So I don't think it will change much. The proponents of the modern monetary theory, MMT, for example, will be happy to have such a thing because it just makes things easier when everything is electronic. As the head of central bank in the United States says, well, we just press a button on a computer and $1 trillion appears on the screen, and then we just lend that money to the banks, right? So I don't think the system is any different. It's just a repackaging of the old paradigm. It's all the same. It's centrally controlled and centrally issued money that is absolutely backed by nothing but promises of the government, by the debt by the debt that the future generations will have to somehow pay, and everybody knows that they're not going to pay it. That's my take on it.
And what's interesting to me is the level of interconnectivity that arises as a result of something like this. One of the articles that I was reading regarding the Bank of England and how they're implementing this is they're starting with the payments network first and foremost, and then layering on top of that a potential digital pound. To me, what the implications of that are is the network itself that is available for the creation of this asset is not only given to the governments, but also given to the large corporations and the debtors of the particular geographic region. And this holds with it certain implications because they are going to be the ones who actually might be involved in the future in the printing and in the creation and adjustment of the supply of the money in the circulation as well. And the reason being is because while this has been predominantly been the realm of the central banks, there are a lot of indications that corporations, especially the banking sector, holds quite a substantial amount of power as well as the tech in an economy. They also have a lot of data on users. And this is where the topic of interconnectivity starts to really kick in. Not only are they working on integrating those companies into the payments network, into the back end, and then eventually bringing in the digital pound, but what they're also doing is through that connectivity, it becomes a partnership. And that partnership opens up the corporation and the government to collude together in order to be able to create user-associated financial records. And this is something that hasn't been able to be done with a cash-based economy. As we spoke about on previous episodes, it's very easy to go on Craigslist, for example, and sell your bike for cash. However, if you're entering into an ecosystem where all payments are digital, and on top of that, your financial institutions and all your social media outlets are connected together, entwined in one particular organization, if you will, then from A to B, your purchases can be tracked not only from the original inception, but also to the very end of the line, wherever it happens to be. And this is a strong implication of what it's going to look like in the future in terms of financial sovereignty and digital privacy. In Europe, it's quite interesting because they have the GDPR, and currently there's no such systems being thought out there quite yet, unlike in Canada and Britain. So that's one of the biggest hurdles that they have in enforcing this type of ecosystem over there, is the idea that a user's data needs to be able to be wiped from a server. When you're looking in and talking about an interconnected network of financial records, metadata, as well as transfer records on some blockchain, it's very difficult to erase one single point of activity and anything associated with it. So because of that, there are some hurdles, of course, in place. But going back to the implications, I think that in the future, as many people have watched the episode of Black Mirror on the social score, we are going to have a commingling of your social presence online with the availability of that individual to purchase goods within an ecosystem, a geography, a nation, a country, what have you. And this type of cancel culture that we currently are experiencing in the social media space could translate to financial cancel culture, in a sense where if your particular data set matches certain heuristics that are of course monitored constantly by an artificial intelligence, then your transactability might actually be restricted. And with this would come a whole sorts of difficulties for day-to-day life. For example, think of just going to the grocery store. You're very comfortable with whipping out, paying your phone, and settling for your groceries and moving on your way. Well, now, can you imagine if that's declined? It says, sorry, your social score is not high enough. Please complete these tasks in these areas in order to be able to go buy groceries again. So a little bit of a dystopian look on it, of course. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but it's very clear that the central banks see any kind of competing digital currency and the ability to issue funds, whether it's going to be on a public blockchain, in which case it's through proof of work, or on a private blockchain, if it's the case of Libra, in terms of actual organized coercion on their side for the money supply. It's clear that the banks do not want this to happen, and they are racing to get this done. Bitcoin, in my opinion, is the only way to be able to escape that and to have some sense of financial sovereignty. To finish off, Yuri, do you think that the road ahead for the banks, the central banks, is going to be paved with people falling in line with all of this, or do you expect some type of resistance to start building up in certain areas of the economy, certain areas of the technology space, such as Bitcoin? What are your thoughts?
Well, unfortunately, I think that the vast majority of people will have to follow at first because that's what most people do. Uh, they usually defer such decisions to authority because they don't want to take responsibility on their shoulders. Most people are followers, we have to remember that. However, with the uh, expansion of the Bitcoin economy, with the proliferation of Bitcoin among many thousands and millions of people around the world, I think a shift will start happening. And as we discussed before, whether it will be a completely different parallel Bitcoin economy or the economy or the Bitcoin economy will be integrated in the current economy, we will have to see, but eventually this shift will start happening. I think the vast majority of people will not really care about the um, uh, technical side of Bitcoin, its uh, ethical issues or censorship resistance. They will simply see number go up. They will see that the price appreciates, and they will get into it as a means of investment. But once they have the wallet, once they receive their first Bitcoin, and once they decide to send it to someone else to buy a good or a service, they will really understand the power of what they have just done, and they will just come back to it because it's so much better than the other system that they have. If a dystopian future that you just described actually comes about, then it's very easy to compare Bitcoin with that. Uh, you will have on the one hand you will have a wallet which tracks every single thing that you do, that can deny you transactions, that can ask you questions in real time. What is this for and who is it coming from? Or you have another wallet that doesn't ask any questions, that you can uh, launch without any identification documents. So you can just download it in 1 minute and go and send money anywhere on the planet pretty much instantaneously. So I think that is a big advantage of Bitcoin, and we will see people shift slowly but surely. I don't think it will be some miraculous mass awakening. It will probably be a very slow process, which is a good thing for the people who are watching this video, because you can definitely consider yourself early adopters. Early adopters in something that will be transpiring over the next several decades. That's my opinion on how it will happen.
So would that be on the right side? And I think it's a very clear choice for myself and you, hopefully for our audience as well. And with that, my name is Nick, signing off.
And my name is Yuri. Check out moontower.co, and thanks for joining.